Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Haribol. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, all of you. We extend a very, very hearty welcome to all the assembled devotees, and special thanks to all the devotees who have performed their Kirtan Seva just now. So I would like to now invite His Grace Dhira Govinda Prabhu, also known as Dr. David Book, to enlighten us on this special occasion of Krsna Janmastami event. What is the signification of this event, what we are celebrating assembled all together. So I request Dhira Govinda Prabhu, please enlighten us on this event. Thank you very much.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, it's August 25th, 2024. And tomorrow is Sri Krsna Janmastami. Janma means appearance. Astami indicates the 8th day of the moon. So technically we talk about the appearance of Sri Krishna. In common language, we could say tomorrow is Krishna's birthday. And more philosophically, appearance, because it's described in Natastya Karyam Karanam Navijite, that for pure personalities, such as God, Krishna in any of his forms, or for the pure devotees of God, like Srila Prabhupada, Jesus, they're not forced to take birth to fulfill material desires like us conditioned souls, but they're choosing to appear to enact a divine mission. So I thought we'll study a verse from Bhagavad Gita that relates Krishna speaking about Krishna's birthday, about his appearance. So there are several sections in Bhagavad Gita about that. And so this is Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 4, entitled Transcendental Knowledge. This is text 7. I'll read the Sanskrit. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhutanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. So that's Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the word Srijami is significant herein. Srijami cannot be used in the sense of creation, because according to the previous verse, there is no creation of the Lord's form or body, since all of the forms are eternally existent. Therefore, Srijami means that the Lord manifests himself as he is, Although the Lord appears on schedule, namely at the end of Dwapara Yuga of the 28th millennium of the 7th Manu in one day of Brahman, still he has no obligation to adhere to such rules and regulations because he is completely free to act in many ways at his will. He therefore appears by his own will whenever there is a predominance of irreligiosity and a disappearance of true religion. Principles of religion are laid down in the Vedas, and any discrepancy in the matter of properly executing the rules of the Vedas makes one irreligious. In the Bhagavatam, it is stated that such principles are the laws of the Lord. Only the Lord can manufacture a system of religion. The Vedas are also accepted as originally spoken by the Lord himself to Brahma from within his heart. Therefore, the principles of Dharma, or religion, are the direct orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Dharmam tu Sakshat Bhagavat Pranidham. These principles are clearly indicated throughout the Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of the Vedas is to establish such principles under the order of the Supreme Lord. And the Lord directly orders at the end of the Gita that the highest principle of religion is to surrender unto him only and nothing more. The Vedic principles push one towards complete surrender unto him. And whenever such principles are disturbed by the demonic, the Lord appears. From the Bhagavatam, we understand that Lord Buddha is the incarnation of Krishna, who appeared when materialism was rampant and materialists were using the pretext of the authority of the Vedas. So I'll just pause there. So the Buddha is an incarnation of Krishna. That's described in the Vedas, such as the Srimad Bhagavatam, both first and second canto. Although there are certain restrictive rules and regulations regarding animal sacrifice for particular purposes in the Vedas, people of demonic tendencies still took to animal sacrifice without reference to Vedic principles. Lord Buddha appeared to stop this nonsense and to establish the Vedic principles of non-violence. So we hear that the main purpose of the Buddha's appearance is ahimso paramo dharma, which means to eliminate unnecessary violence, particularly to animals. That's the main principle of the Buddha's appearance. Therefore, each and every avatar or incarnation of the Lord has a particular mission, and they are all described in the revealed scriptures. No one should be accepted as an avatar unless he is referred to by scriptures. It is not a fact that the Lord appears only on Indian soil. He can advent himself anywhere and everywhere, and whenever he desires to appear. In each and every incarnation, he speaks as much about religion as can be understood by the particular people under their particular circumstances. But the mission is the same, to lead people to God consciousness and obedience to the principles of religion. Sometimes he descends personally, and sometimes he sends his bona fide representatives in the form of his son or servant or himself in some disguised form. Pause again there. We can see, well, I'm reminded there's an oft-quoted segment from the Bible, the New Testament, where Jesus says, I have many things to tell you, but you cannot bear them. Jesus says, yes, I have lots more to say, but you're not ready to hear it. Okay, so Jesus, like all pure representatives of God and God himself, Krishna ete chamsakla pumsam, Krishna's tu bhagavan svayam, Krishna, the source of all incarnations. Krishna clarifies, Hamadir Hidevanam Maharshinam Shasarvasha. He says he's not just another demigod or sage or prophet. He's the source of the demigods, the sages, and the prophets. And so they meet us as individuals and as groups of people. They meet us where they're at, and they give knowledge that we're ready to absorb, meeting us where we're at, and always inspiring and encouraging us to advance towards pure God consciousness. looking at the language that Prabhupada uses here in the most recent sentence we read, Prabhupada writes, sometimes he descends personally, like Krishna descending personally. Tomorrow's the anniversary of Krishna's appearance. And sometimes he sends his bona fide representative in the form of his son or a servant or himself in some disguised form. So his son, I'm understanding, Srila Prabhupada is referring to Jesus there, or a servant. I'm understanding Srila Prabhupada is referring to Muhammad there, or himself in some disguised form there. Srila Prabhupada is referring to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya, who appeared about 540 years ago, 538 or so. That he's known as the Chana Avatar. He's Krishna, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nayana. He's Krishna in the form of a devotee of Krishna. And so that's what Prabhupada is referring to, in some disguised form. Just like, we all have propensity to be kind of tricky, right? We all have that propensity to be tricky. So where does that come from? It comes from God. Anything that exists with us exists in God in its original pure form. That when it's enacted and manifest by Krishna, it's completely pure out of compassion. So Krishna appears. The Srila Prabhupada gives the example sometimes, just like, okay, there could be a teacher in the schoolroom, and the teacher goes to the student and takes the student's hand, because the students are just learning how to write the alphabet. So the teacher will, okay, here's how you do it. A, B, C, here's how you do it. So that's like Lord Chaitanya. He's Krishna, and like Krishna, he shares in Bhagavad Gita the conclusion of all the Vedas, Savardhaman Prithyagya Mamekam Sharanam Braja, Aham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Mokshayashami Masucha. Just abandon all the yoga, abandon all the religion, abandon all the philosophical paths, and just surrender to me, pure bhakti. Okay, so that's the goal. Pure bhakti, pure love, pure service to God. And so then Krishna, 4,500 years later, comes as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he's saying, okay, here's how to do it. So Lord Chaitanya is a disguised form of Krishna, in the form of Krishna, showing us here's how to do it. Just like the teacher doesn't need to practice A, B, C, but as out of compassion and care for the student, the teacher said, here's how to do it. Okay. One more paragraph to this purport, then we'll continue our conversation. Srila Prabhupada writes, the principles of the Bhagavad Gita were spoken to Arjuna, and for that matter, to other highly elevated persons, because he was highly advanced compared to ordinary persons in other parts of the world. 2 + 2 = 4 is a mathematical principle that is true both in the beginner's arithmetic class and in the advanced class as well. Still, there are higher and lower mathematics. In all incarnations of the Lord, therefore, the same principles are taught, but they appear to be higher and lower in varied circumstances. The higher principles of religion begin with the acceptance of the 4 orders and the 4 statuses of social life. As will be explained later, the whole purpose of the mission of incarnation is to arouse Krishna consciousness everywhere. Such consciousness is manifest and non-manifest only under different circumstances. Before we continue, I'll continue by, I'm going to recite a few more mantras to continue to invoke auspiciousness in our association, feeling that the essence of these mantras, at least my essence, is I'm invoking the blessings of pure personalities, the pure teachers, Srila Prabhupada, and the previous acharyas and Krishna, that whatever I might say, that it represents them authentically and properly. That I'm just not making up some stuff that sounds good to David Wolf from Dhira Govinda Das. That whatever I say is aligned in spirit, substance, and content with the true message of Bhagavad Gita. So, Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Skapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamupakadamayam Dilati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Lascha Shri Rupam Jitam Saganaraganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvekam Savadutam Purijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Lascha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagat Pate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Dievacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Karine Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 text 7 Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata bhutanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of e-religion, at that time I descend myself. I'm remembering a personal story related to this verse. So this goes back a while. This goes back. Let's go back to the late 1980s. Anyone remember the 1980s? Yes. Right. So yes, it goes back about 35 years. And I was practicing and sharing and endeavoring to educate groups in Krishna consciousness in the Middle East, including Haaretz Yisrael, including Israel. And so I was actually living in Arab villages at that time. Yeah, I was about 28 years old. I was in my mid to late 20s. And we were living in Arab villages. Particularly, there was one group called the Druze. And I won't get into too many details about that. But the Druze, they're actually a Vedic sect transplanted into the Middle East. And they kind of need to sort of pretend to be a sort of Muslim, but they're actually a Vedic sect. And so we're visiting a lot of Druze villages. One fun day, we had our Sankirtans. We did a lot of distribution of Prabhupada's books in Hebrew, in Arabic, a little bit in English to those who were specially educated in the villages. And we go to the villages. So at that time, in the late 80s, there was one neighborhood we heard about. It was actually a village called Kabavir. It was a village called Kabavir right in the northern section of Haifa. I think now it's officially part of the city of Haifa. Okay, right? And Haifa is so now. Okay, so actually, when I first came to Israel in 1983, I came not on an airplane. I came on a ship from Greece through Crete, through Cyprus, and then we came to the port at Haifa. Came to a port at Haifa, and then when you come in, there's the Carmel Mountain. There's the Carmel Mountain range. There's lots of biblical history. The prophet Elijah was there, and St. George, and there's lots of biblical history on the Carmel. But as you come in on the ship, on the Mediterranean Sea to Haifa, you see these two beautiful minarets at the top of the Carmel Mountain. So by that time, I'd already been in Israel 6 years, but I'd never been up. Never been up there. So we heard about this kind of neighborhood village called Kabavir. Okay. And I didn't know what it was. First bus boat. There wasn't like, why didn't you just search it on Google. You didn't do that in the 1980s, okay? So like, it's just like this kind of like strange, mysterious place. So we go there, and I'm dressed fully in devotional attire, like Nichi Gopal's dressed now. It was like a dhoti kurtan. I do have kiva today, and it's shaped up with the Sikh. Full devotional attire. I went with some of my Sankirtan buddies. Sankirtan buddies, we had our book cart. And then we know it was like an Arab village in, so we, the idea that these books are very foreign for them. It was a Muslim village. It was a Muslim village. So I started to circulate, I started to walk around the village. There's not too many people there. I came to a few shops. No one was interested. And like, there wasn't many people around. And then I crossed and I saw, oh, here's the big mosque with those minarets that I had seen 6 years ago when I first entered the Mediterranean Sea on the Carmel Mountain. I said, here's the mosque. And so like, it seemed like practically the whole village was in the mosque. So that's why there was like going around. All right. Anyway, let's continue to stroll. And I continue to stroll around. I have my book. I'm doing like this because I have this book, right? Like that, with all of Prabhupada's books, mostly Arabic, Hebrew. And then about half an hour later, I'm strolling around. And again, I come to the mosque. And just at that time, the mosque is letting out. And, and so the villagers, they're coming out of services at the mosque. And I see there's this one Arab Muslim sheikh, and he's coming down. He was clearly a leader. He wasn't like elderly. I would say he was like mid-30s, a little older than I was at that time. And he had this like, black beard, dressed in very nice black robes, like very effulgent. And so he's clearly the religious leader of the community. And so I'm kind of strong, trying to looking for people to show the books to. They'll have to be like, oh, I'm not sure. The reception in this village so far, I'm not so sure. And like, this is really foreign to these people, So then he's standing, he's maybe about 20 yards in front of me. And I'm strolling, I've got my devotional robes there, got my devotional robes. And I'm strolling the book cart. And I put my head up and he makes eye contact. He makes eye contact with me. And as I get maybe about 15 feet away, with a very majestic motion, he says, Yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhutanam dharmasya taratmanam srijam yam. I had a face just like yours. I was like, what? Like, this is surreal. I mean, previous in my life, I experimented with different psychedelics and real experiences, but that was a previous lifetime. I was like, what's going on? No, he's not just like, oh, I heard of something from India. No, he like quoted the verse with like lots of better Sanskrit than I could quote it. Okay? Yeah, just like right out of Bhagavad Gita. Like, whoa. Like Twilight Zone, something like that. Okay. So that verse made an impression. It was like Twilight Zone stuff for me. Yeah. So
he said, I don't need this Gita, I know it.
yes. Right. So but like, how do you know it? I'm the one who's here to introduce this to you, because you're ignorant about all of this.
He said, I already know it, sir.
He knew like all 700 verses. So like, you're like in the Muslim village like that. So he says, come with me. He was like taking pity on me, like kind of like, yeah, so we stroll about half a mile and he invites me into his home. So it turns out, okay, so it is an Islamic village. And it's the Ahmadiyya sect, And I wasn't familiar at the time. Somebody was shaking their head. So they go back, like for them, like the final prophet is not Muhammad. The final prophet is someone named Ahmad, who apparently appeared in like India in like the 1800s or something. And it's like this sect that not too many people know about. And so So he knows Bhagavad Gita. He had different versions of Bhagavad Gita in Arabic, Hebrew, and English, and like that. And actually, they regarded Krishna. It's like it's a different sort of sect of Islam. So he wasn't like, oh, this is all heathen. No, they regarded Krishna as a great saint and prophet and this and that. So we were having adventures like that practically every day. Not exactly like that, but like that. So this verse has special, it's like made an imprint on me, a samskar, an enduring impression on my heart mind, thanks to this special Islamic sheikh there from the Ahmadiyya sect. So the verse, Krishna talks about like religion and irreligion. And so we can just like, I know myself, I've never, since my teenage years, I've never been interested in religion. And I remain very uninterested in religion. They say, well, you're doing this like Hare Krishna stuff every day. What do you mean you're not interested in religion? I mean, in the conventional sense. In the conventional, like, you a Christian or a Jew or what did you, like, I was never interested in joining anything. I was never interested in trying to get others to join anything. Even now, it's like, if someone says, are you a Hare Krishna? No. I definitely don't identify that. I endeavor to practice a process of God consciousness and practice a science of self-realization called Bhakti Yoga, also known as Krishna consciousness. Here's what I'm practicing. And here are the results I'm experiencing for the last 40 some years. And I'm very satisfied with the results. So since I can remember, like 15 years old or so, I've been very interested in the science of realization, a science of self-realization that actually transforms the heart and actually transforms the consciousness. I've never been interested in, are you joining this religion? I was a Buddhist, now I'm a Jew. That stuff never interested me. I'm interested in practicing a process of self-realization that actually works in terms of developing godly qualities, like reading the heart, reading my heart of greed, lust, envy, deception, and actually experiencing godly qualities like compassion and peace and freedom and kindness and self-control and empowerment, etc., etc. So I'm practicing Krishna consciousness under the guidance of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for more than 40 years. And you can say, Prabhupada used that term a lot. Even I saw a copy of, there's a book table out there. Actually, the first book of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada that I read is called A Science of Self-Realization. I read that in 1980. I highly recommend it. And it's not about, do you believe this, do you believe that? It's a science. Like you can think of, there's like two main pillars in science. One is a logical hypothesis, a logical set of philosophical principles, logical precepts that make sense, that's rational. So,
Very high.
and the other pillar of a scientific process is an experiment. It's experiential. It's experiential. Meaning, you might say, oh, okay, well, according to the logic of the chemistry and the algebra, mix 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, and you make water. I'm skeptical. I'm not just going to believe that. You don't need to blindly believe. You can go into the laboratory, mix the chemicals, see if you get the same results as so many other chemists over the years. So similarly, here's so Bhagavad Gita is not just completely consistent philosophy of life, and you don't need to accept my assertion that it's completely logical. You're fully encouraged. We're all fully apply our intelligence, ask questions, and see if it's satisfying. But it also says, and here's an experiment you can do. An experiment. The laboratory is our consciousness. The laboratory is our heart. Here's an experiment you can do to see if you get the same results of transformation of heart, transformation of consciousness, as so many other spiritual scientists over the millennium. So that's the, actually, if we look at the English word religion and deconstruct it, break it down, the actual meaning isn't about some sets of rules and regulations. Like we can see the English word leg in there. Okay. So the actual meaning of religion is the same as the word yoga. The Sanskrit yoga essentially means to connect. It means plus, to connect two things. And it's in its essential form. Yoga means the self turning towards itself in self-realization, the self connecting with itself in self-discovery, and the self turning towards the divine person, Krishna, in a spirit of devotion. That's the essence of yoga. And that's really the essence of what real religion is. So in the essential sense, I'm interested in religion, not in what's become known as the conventional sense. Okay, so now, also, this verse is meaning for me, I shared one powerful reason why it's meaningful for me, that experience at Kababir, 1989. Also, here, there's a principle like that for me was and is just so powerful. It's the principle of time, place, circumstance, and person. So just like, let's say, an expert educator, an expert teacher, and an expert teacher is not just like, okay, all children learn the same way. Here's what we do. Now, an expert teacher will know. With this child, if I give some like soft eye contact, he'll really respond. He'll be very receptive. With this child, we have some physical motion. Then he's ready to learn. Now, with this child over here, yeah, some sound vibration. Maybe if we like integrate some music into the lesson, then this child's ready to hear. So that now we would think that the supremely intelligent person, God, Sri Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead, would be a high-level educator. And so that's exactly what this verse is saying. That's exactly what this text is saying. So Krishna is saying that, yeah, according to each individual in each group, I meet people where they're at, and always give them knowledge and process to progress towards purification of heart, towards the ultimate goal, pure love of God. Right? So the principles are always the same. The principles are always consistent, always the same. The details might be different. Bhaktivedanta Swami gives one example. He mentions about like killing animals, meat eating, and the purpose of the Buddha's incarnation. So certainly, well, I mentioned some Middle East adventures in my history. So, okay. So if we look at the Old Testament from the Hebrew, that's the testament that begins. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. That was not Sanskrit. You may have recognized it wasn't English either. That was Hebrew, and that's the first words of the Bible. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Interesting. This is just a tangent to the point I was making. Make sure I don't go on too many tangents. Okay, I'll go on one tangent here. So the way that's always translated, if you look at, whether it's a Christian or Jewish translation of the Old Testament, the way that's translated is in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. You're familiar with that? In the beginning, God created at the beginning of the Bible. But the actual Hebrew says, very interesting, the actual Hebrew, I'll get a little technical. In the beginning would be Bereshit, bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, Bereshit. But the Hebrew doesn't say that. Even the way the rabbis or the priests would pronounce it is Bereshit. Bereshit actually translates in the Hebrew as in a beginning, God created heaven and earth. Now, in every translation of English or in German, it's in the beginning, but it doesn't say it, it says in a beginning, just more than one beginning. So then that gets very consistent with the Vedic conception of cyclical time. We can see both in Middle East religions and modern science, the idea is time is linear, right? There was the beginning, and if the Vedic conception, no, time is cyclical, and so in a beginning, so very, very consistent. So in that Old Testament, before the Ten Commandments, or before Moses received the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, before the Ten Commandments, you have God giving to the Jews the Noahide laws. You have other commandments.
Sorry.
You have other commandments. One of the commandments in that early part of the Old Testament, one of the commandments is telling humans, don't chop off the limb of an animal and start just chewing on the limb. Stay with me. Kind of gross. It's very gross. Kind of gross. But what's it mean that God gave that commandment? It means that the people he was talking to in the desert at that time, 4,000 years ago, they were doing things like chopping off the limbs of animals and just eating the limb. Right? So Prabhupada's making the point in this purport, Krishna didn't need to tell to Arjuna, don't torture animals. Arjuna was a slave. Very elevated soul, refined spiritual character. So, now, if we look at I mentioned, the Bible starts with Bereshit bara Elohim Shemayim v'Ha'aretz. And then in that same first chapter of the Bible, God makes it clear. The ideal diet for human beings is vegetarian. First chapter of Genesis. The ideal diet is vegetarian. Herbs and leaves and fruit and vegetables. Yeah. Then later he says, he says, okay, you're not able to do that. You're not able to just give up killing animals altogether. But at least reduce the torture. Don't put them so much pain. So we're just using that as one principle about diet. Okay, so the principle is the same. Because you can say, well, there's a contradiction. But even in the Vedas, some part of the Vedas say, oh yes, no killing animals, no meat eating. Other parts of the Vedas talk about animal killing under certain rules and regulations. So similarly with the Old Testament. So the principle is like the people in the desert at that time, or different people in different Vedic ages, they're not ready to completely give up the taste of blood and flesh. So God's meeting them where they're at. And then in the Old Testament, he said, at least don't torture the animal, don't cut off its limb and eat that. And then he gives the laws of kashrut, the laws of kosher, to not cook a calf in the milk of its mother. So towards humanity, towards sattvic principles. So the principle is that this is the principle of time and circumstance, and that's so moved and impressed me when I first encountered it. When I first read Srila Prabhupada's Science of Self-Realization in the year 1980, because then I could see, like, okay, like, each philosophical system, each approach to religious life. I've been to born-again groups. I was raised in Reformed Judaism. I visited Buddhist centers. And so through Bhagavad Gita, I got a foundation and a container for which I could understand all of that. Oh, God, either directly or through his pure representatives, is meeting different people where they're at, always encouraging them to grow towards their original happiness. Nietzsche said, Krishna bring the subject up north. Our original nature is to be blissful in loving service to Krishna. And so, so Krishna is winning that, and he's compassionate, like a compassionate teacher, knowing how each of us learns and giving us guidance and stretches and instructions to move us along to the path of our own happiness. Srila Prabhupada, what he gives the example of the Buddha. He gives the mathematics example, so we can expand on that a bit. Okay? So just like, all right. So in first grade, the mathematics teacher teaches 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay? And then let's say to the graduate math majors in the university, the teacher's teaching integral calculus, how to calculate the area underneath the curve, right? So the teacher is consistent and steady. Whoever the teacher meets, I'm gonna meet you where you're at and give you knowledge to encourage you to deepen your enthusiasm to learn that and go to the next step. So the teacher is consistent. Even we can imagine, let's extend the analogy more. Let's say someone who's learning 2 plus 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6. And then such a person looks in the calculus book and sees all these squiggly lines. And then that person says, this is not math, this is the devil. You with me on this? Okay. Yes, this is not math. Okay. So we can connect the dots on that metaphor there. And similarly, if we happen to be exposed to differential and integral calculus, it's also a danger to feel proud that perhaps we have this most sublime transcendental knowledge. This chapter of Bhagavad Gita is entitled Transcendental Knowledge. We have this knowledge of the distinction between the soul and the body, the distinction between the soul and the super soul, the distinction between super soul and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of God, hundreds of powerful distinctions for the science of self-realization. If we're feeling, oh, that's because I'm so much more elevated, so there could be someone who's studying a book that's 2 plus 2 is 4. Perhaps they're a lot more elevated than I am. And it's not like any credit of mine that Srila Prabhupada, out of his compassion, is giving this most complete. Krishna says in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, now I'm declaring unto you this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinal, after knowing which there's no more categories to know. And that contrasts with Krishna's pure devotee Jesus, who said, I have a lot more to tell you. You're not ready to hear it. Even though we're not ready to hear it, Prabhupada's giving it to us anyway. So we mentioned how all of the qualities in us, just like all of the qualities in a drop of water, it's a microcosm of the full ocean. Similarly, all the qualities in us exist in their pure, complete form in Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We mentioned with compassion, Krishna has the quality to be the supreme trickster, just like we all have our tricky natures, not always used in the spiritual ways in the Christian realm. And Krishna says that. He says, yeah, if you want to try to cheat and deceive, I'll just run. So you'll just be so baffled by my trickery, you won't have a clue. So sometimes, for truly compassionate spiritual purposes, Krishna, just like Prabhupada was discussing, the Buddha, the Buddha kind of encouraged people to leave the Vedas, forget about the Vedas, because there was so much misuse and abuse of the Vedas. St. Augustine said, never judge a philosophy by its abuse. So the Buddha could see, try to bring them back to the actual authentic Veda teachings, hopeless. So he kind of tricked them. He was Krishna through the Buddha trick. Just forget about the Vedas and follow me. Just forget about it. And that way they came to Bhakti. One more, well, I opened with a personal story from Kabir in the Middle East. So another personal story. This one's from Switzerland. This one's from Switzerland. In Switzerland, was in 2016. In 2016, and I was there to conduct some Sakato seminars. Some of you know what that means. Sakato seminars, anyhow, they're transformational seminars, all based on Bhagavad Gita. And I was staying at the Bonomo residence with Annette and Peter, now Anandini Devi Dasi and Paramatma Das, and their daughters, Luke and Noah. And so it was in a village called Ricon, Switzerland. Ricon, Switzerland. It wasn't quite in the Alps, more like the foothills of the Alps. And it was winter, it's like February. And so one fun day, we all took a walk in the snow up the mountain, because it turns out that right there, just right there in Ricon, Switzerland, in the mountains, there's really the European headquarters of Tibetan Buddhism. Like when the Dalai Lama visits Europe, he goes to this ashram. And so actually we did this walk, and Annette arranged scavenger hunt, and there were snowball fights. I didn't do well. And anyhow, so we get to the ashram. Now, the Buddhist approach is known as being nihilistic, voidist, and like at the core we are nothing. That's like the Buddhist philosophy, kind of dry, shunyavad, nirvisheshan, shunyavad philosophy, voidist, non-bhakti. So we get to the ashram, very nice building, very nice vibrations, and I walk in with the bonomos. I walk in, and the first thing I notice, very powerful, is bhakti. Atmosphere full of bhakti. There was a big murti of the Buddha. We had these brahmacharis, very devoted, offering a slice of apple, offering incense, with so much devotion. So I had an experience, because I'd been reading Prabhupada's books for 36 years before that, and about, transcendental trickery, and how the Buddha tricked them to come. But then I had a direct experience of, like, this works, because they were serving Buddha, who's a Shakti-based avatar, a Krishna. They were serving him with such bhakti, and even if their philosophy was voidist and non-personal, but still their hearts were softening. So just like a parent maybe wants the child to eat the vegetables, it says, "Oh, have the vegetables, then you can have some sweets." Okay. Oh, I can have sweets. That's like a trick. Okay. So much in the name of religion and spirituality in so many traditions, including the Vedas. It's like, be good and go to heaven and you can really enjoy, or be religious and then your business will do well. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? My friends all have Porsches. I must make amends. Mother Jana knows that shloka. She knows all the shlokas. Yes. So Janice Joplin. Okay. So but that's the idea, like the American work ethic, the American Protestantism, work ethic, that sort of thing. So the ultimate purpose, Dharma Project of Kurjavitra Paramonima Saranam Sena, the ultimate purpose of true religion, true spiritual paths, isn't a Mercedes Benz or economic development or going to heaven and enjoying. But that can be like, you can get some sweets if you do this, and it works, because then we get some taste for some devotion, and then more and more as we practice, that's the taste I want, the devotion, not the sweets or the heavenly planets or the bigger bank account. I mean, that might be there anyway, but that doesn't become the goal. Of course, it's this, in the analogy is given of like the disease of jaundice. Apparently, when someone has the disease of jaundice, sweet things taste bitter. And apparently, the cure for jaundice is to eat sweets. And when we eat sweets and we get cured, the sweets taste sweeter and sweeter. So because of our spiritually jaundiced nature, some aspects of the process, the scientific process of Krishna consciousness, might feel bitter. Get up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and spend so many hours chanting these mantras, reading these Srila Prabhupada's books. As we develop the taste, then everything about Krishna consciousness becomes like cotton candy. This text reads, whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice or descendant of Bharata and a predominant rise of irreligion at that time, I just said myself, Hare Krishna, thank you for giving your power of hearing to Bhagavad Gita as it is. If we want, we can give some time. Anyone wants to share any comments or realizations or ask any questions at this time?
I'd like to add something.
Mahatma Prabhu.
I come from a very strong, you could say, Christian background.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that Jesus said that in addition to that, I cannot tell you because you could not bear to hear it.
Yeah.
You would not understand it.
Yeah.
He did say, but there will be someone coming after me.
Wow.
And a lot of us Christians became Prabhupada knew us because we concluded that Prabhupada is that person.
Wow.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is that person. Because Prabhupada is the external manifestation of Paramatma, right?
Yeah.
So, so that's an important part.
Yeah.
Not only Christians, but also Muslims in my interaction with some Muslim groups.
Yeah.
Like the Ahmadiyya, who claim that Jesus is buried in the Himalayas, that Abraham is from the Himalayas, that Moses is in the Himalayas.
Yeah.
I went to these places.
You visited those sites.
They also say that there will be somebody coming after Muhammad from the east, and he will have golden colored skin.
Wow.
I don't know if anyone's heard that. The Ahmadiyyas and others, here's what they do. And I think that because of that, perhaps it is that many Muslims are also accepting Shri Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Prabhupada.
Thanks for sharing, Mahatma Prabhu. Thanks for that. Yeah. Yeah. So you're referencing. Well, you have a rich Christian background, and I mentioned Jesus' statement that a lot more to say. You're not able to hear it at this time, and Jesus is foretelling, and there will be someone coming who will give you a more expansive knowledge about the science of self-realization. Thanks for bringing in these elements and connecting those dots.
Prabhupada also said that archaeologists concluded that Jesus, after the event of the tomb, went to Kashmir.
Yeah.
That's on
Kashmir.
1:7.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Thanks for attending.
Then he also said that he is a devotee of Lord Jagannath. So if you do research on this, Jesus spent 6 years at the Jagannath Mandir temple.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada refers to Srila Prabhupada read the Aquarian Gospel, and he doesn't say it's Shastra. but he will make references like, well, I read this book in the Christian tradition, and it says Jesus visited Jagannath Puri and he had association with the priest there. Thanks for those special references.
I have a question. You said that this process makes for one to become humanistic and empathetic. That means that one identifies, wants to minimize the suffering of others, right? But I've been practicing 46 years, and it's a difficult thing to actually be truly humanistic and truly empathetic, and I've seen it in myself and other people. So how can what is it that we're doing wrong perhaps?
I'm hearing you're practicing since the late 1970s, and you're experiencing struggle to be consistently, deeply compassionate and feel paraduka-duki, the pain of others is your own, and deeply empathic. And so you're wondering, what's happening here? And well, I appreciate what I perceive as your humility in that question. And speaking for myself, and based on thousands of endeavoring practitioners of Bhakti Yoga over the decades, and that well, I could also, if I wanted to, become discouraged at how little progress. For me, it's been like 42 years since I'm chanting Hare Krishna. And at the same time, I'm actually encouraged. Because if I consider where I was before I came in contact with Srila Prabhupada's movement and his teachings and his books, then whatever auspicious qualities I have, including compassion and empathy, they'd be drastically less. I'd be so lost, misled, misinformed, and misguided, and misleading, and misguiding, and misinforming others, maybe with a pretense of empathy, but with real hard-heartedness and callousness to their suffering, just wanting to protect my ego and telling myself it would maybe So I can certainly look at myself, and I guess the answer to the question in relation to myself is my resistance to surrender to the process. I can truly say, it's true for me, that this process works to transform the heart in the ways 100% full conviction, this process powerfully works. And my experience 100% confirms that it works. So are you saying, dear Govinda Das, that you're always experiencing this deep love of God, compassion? No, not at all. But I can say that whenever, and maybe it's a few moments per day or whatever, to whatever extent I've given myself to the process, it works. And I experience soft-heartedness and enthusiasm and inspiration and freedom and security. And my struggle and my resistance and my hanging on to envy and false ego and shame and deception, that's when I'm not in the process. That's when I'm resisting the process. So yeah, I can be discouraged that in 42 years, I've made like a few inches of progress, and this path is infinite millions of miles, and I made a few inches. At the same time, I'm actually very inspired and encouraged, because even a few inches of progress on this path of Bhakti Yoga, under the guidance of Srila Prabhupada, that's worth more than millions of miles of progress on any other path. I'm 100% convinced about that. If in this lifetime, maybe I'm here for another day, maybe another 30 years into my 90s, something like that. If in this lifetime I make another 2 inches of progress, I'll consider that success. And at the same time, I endeavor to not be complacent. And I'd like that these Vaishnava holidays, Janmastami, Srila Prabhupada's appearance day, I'd like that somehow I get the inspiration to not just make a few inches, but some quantum jump in sincerity to give myself to this process and let go of my nonsense, garbage, false ego. So the process works. I mean, I say that from experience. I wish I was more. I wish I was more intensively immersed in the process.
This is going to be my last interaction. So that triggers your response, triggered another question.
Yeah.
What is making us not surrender to the process?
What's making?
What is making us, because you said the process works,
Yeah.
but we're not surrendering.
Okay.
So what is making us not to surrender to the process?
Well, because the process is service to Krishna. I want to be Krishna.
That makes sense.
I don't want Krishna to be the center. I want David Wolf to be the center. And so and I think that's actually a good plan if you would just all agree with it. But you're not. So that's the problem. That's the problem with the universe. You don't all agree that David Wolf should be the center. So that's the reason. Thank you.
Thank
Anu Bhavananda Prabhu.
Yeah, I thought it was very nice how you were describing how Krishna approaches us according to where we're at.
Yeah.
That's really a fact because that's my experience. Krishna's approaching me to where I'm at through these poems that I've been writing. He's been blessing me to write these poems all these years. And that's my connection. Krishna's man with me, according to my mentality, my very extremely simple mentality. I'm not really good at even strictly, living a very regulated life. And I because of mental challenges, but still because of my sincerity, because of whatever sincerity I have,
Yeah.
Krishna's engaging me in this. But I also want to mention, I think it's a very nice example of how Jesus is very much like Lord Chaitanya.
Yeah.
Because you probably know this, that at the end of the Visa Purana, Jesus is mentioned. He approaches this king Shalivana, met Jesus, and he was like meditating in the Himalayas. And it's described that he had a golden complexion. That's how it's described there.
Yeah.
And Jesus actually, and he was asking, so what's the religious principle of this time? And Jesus actually described that actually the religious principle is chanting of the holy name. There in the Vivisa Purana.
Yeah.
I think that's more illustrative of what Jesus really was all about than even you'll find in the Bible, which has been, mistranslated so many times, changed so many times. The Vivisa Purana gives you I think a better understanding, in fact, of Jesus than what he was all about was the holy name of God. And convincing people to chant the holy name of God. I believe.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anu Bhavananda. Thanks for your share. Yeah, and that relates to what we're saying here, the time and circumstance. In any genuine spiritual tradition, it's fully recommended to chant the names of God. And like in the Hebrew Old Testament, actually they talk about like the Temple of Solomon, the Temple of David. In the Hebrew, it's actually called the Temple of the Holy Name. It's actually called the Temple of the Holy Name. And so King David HaMelech, he was going around Jerusalem, dressed a lot like the Hare Krishnas, with his associates. And what was he doing? He was in ecstasy doing kirtan with the chilchulim, that's the cartels. And it's described in the Old Testament in the Hebrew, the cartels and the drums and the trumpets. He was doing kirtan. Same we would have programs in the Muslim villages. And we'd be with our japa, we would have programs, and they'd be with their masbaha. Their masbaha has 27 beads, 25%, 108. And it's all about chanting the 99 names of Allah. And so the details of which names to chant might be adjusted, but the principle of chant the holy name as the Yuga Dharma, Haranam, 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 Edakidalam, Law, Stave, Gatyanyata, that's consistent.
That was a real nice reply, I think, to what I said. Very nice, thanks.
And I appreciate your emphasis, how God's representatives like Jesus, that's real empathy. They're meeting us where we're at, not just to like wallow and here's where I'm at, meeting us where we're at as a platform to inspire advancement. Bhagavad Gita ki, to the Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna. Krishna.
Thank you. For shadow home, there's to-go containers. There's a lot there, I believe, so please take some home. Yes, if you're coming to.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I do not pronounce.
Hare Krishna.
So are you based here? You stay here?
I'm living in Alaska, an hour and a half north of here, about an hour and a half north.